Awesome.
Good morning or afternoon, good evening. We're back. We're here to talk about identity stuff that's happening in the community, which I think we're all pretty excited about, yeah?
We are indeed. We are, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us once again.
How's your
It's
week?
fun times, isn't it? Oh man, it's been a weird week. It's been super hot, so trying to make the most out of it with the kids and trying not to think about work too much. As in, you can avoid it, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the kids are having a good time. So we took them swimming these last couple of days at the local lake, but we had to be there super early, like 8 a.m. in the morning, because it gets mobbed later on and people don't wear masks, and we're super concerned. So we're doing a COVID swim, as we call it, where we go in before everybody else and then we leave before everybody else.
Define really hot for me, please.
Uh, it's all it's all relative, Mr. JP. Too hot for us is about 90.
Okay, well, so I'm gonna put up. So this is the weather station that sits outside of my house.
And for Europeans, that's about 30 degrees. So for someone that comes from Greece, which it gets quite hotter in the summer, but it's very dry. We hit easily 37, 38 degrees, so over 100 in Fahrenheit. But it's dry, so you don't get the stickiness that you get near where you are. So yes.
So yesterday,
I totally get it.
So yesterday, yes. Let's see. Yesterday our high was 90. That was the hottest it got. But this week we had one day where it was 99.3 here. And the problem, so this is a weather station that sits on my deck. And let's see. So at one point, the feels like temperature. This was July 29th at 1 p.m. I think you and I are probably on a call. The the outdoor temperature was 90, right? But the dew point was 88. So the humidity was so high that the feels like temperature was 125.7 degrees Fahrenheit. It's pretty miserable, pretty awful.
It is pretty miserable.
Yeah. So, and then the other side effect to that is that I just got my power bill for last month, and we were gone almost all last month, right? Because we were with my in-laws. And so we had our AC set to like 74 or 76 while we were gone. And it was still $290 in power for the month. Just to keep it at 76.
Just the electricity.
Just in electricity, just to keep it at 76 degrees. It was absolutely, it's awful. And then we're going to the beach next week, which I'm super excited about because my kids love the beach. And
who doesn't?
Yeah, and the beach is easy to stay away from other people because we don't go to we're not going to like a Myrtle Beach or anything like that. We're going to a nice little quiet beach that nobody goes to. And now there's a hurricane. There's a hurricane.
Oh, there's a hurricane warning?
Well, there's a tropical storm, and when I looked at it earlier, let's see, I think it's coming close. It's supposed to come close to.
But you're 2 weeks away though.
Well, we're leaving. We're leaving in like 8 days, and Hurricane Isaiah's is, let's see,
8 days away.
Well, no, it looks like it's supposed to pass by the coast on Monday. It's supposed to get down to Florida Sunday, get up by South Carolina Monday, and North Carolina, and then be way, way far north Tuesday. But either, I mean, it could damage the house we're going to. It could flood the house we're going to. It could come further inland and ruin things here for us. I just, it's just 2020. And
it is.
Yesterday, Malik B from The Roots died. It was one of the best bands of all time. Super, super sad. He was 47.
Oh, no, man.
I know. It's just 2020 just can't stop, man. I'm so sick of it. So
it's relentless, I'll tell you that.
Now I hear you.
I
hear you got something on dishwashers.
I did see a tweet this morning that really triggered me. The question was is there a right, in quotes, way to load the dishwasher? And oh man, let me tell you so many stories in the house where my wife would load the dishwasher and then I just open it up and it's just a freak out. I had to take everything out and put it back in the right order because everything in the dishwasher has a right place to be. So I saw that tweet. I was like, "Oh my God, that's so me."
Yep.
So I did respond, say, "Yep, there's only one right way to do the dishwasher. That's my way."
Yeah,
My wife is happy to do that, but she laughs every time I do it because I am OCD with the dishwasher. What about
I
you?
mean, that's our house, right? Is I come up, I've been at work or, we've eaten dinner or something, and then I go upstairs and I'm like, I open up the dishwasher. I'm like, what happened? Like, did somebody break in here and just do this on purpose? Like, why is? And the thing is, the dishwasher will be full, right? I'll be told that the dishwasher is full, and then I'll go I'll go to load the.
Nothing else fits in there.
It's like, oh, well, so there are 3 plates in here that are somehow like laying down flat over the cups. I'm like, what happened? Oh my God! But I saw this thing once, and I don't know if it was tongue in cheek. I'm sure it was probably kind of facetious, but imagine if 2 people got married or were in a relationship where they lived together, and they were both one side or the other, like they were both like dishwasher sticklers or dishwasher challenged.
I think the dishwasher challenge. I like that. I think there's a way around it. You just get 2 dishwashers and you do your own thing, and your other half does the other thing.
Or maybe you hire somebody to do the dishes for you to act as mediator. The only person.
But what if the mediator does it wrong? That's gonna be like, I'm not paying you for doing it wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's funny. So I don't know. I guess if 2 people were really particular about the dishwasher, then that would be easy because at least it would be done correctly. But when both people are dishwasher challenged, I mean, I'd love to see like a 20-year study on that over water usage and power usage in that household. Because if you're running the dishwasher with 4 dishes in it, so you do like 9 loads a day. I mean, I imagine that would probably be. I don't know. It'd be an interesting study. We're solving the world's problems here, right? Or at least trying to.
You came here for identity, and you left with dishwasher advice.
I don't know. I think I need a new dishwasher because mine doesn't work very well anymore. So maybe there's a new one. Well, you know what? Well, no, it'd be cool. This is what we ought to do. This is how we're gonna make our money. We should build a set of templates that you lay down in the dishwasher. And make it very clear where the things are that you want them to go.
Based on personas. So you can have the you can have the
you just project them on there.
You can have the facetious person, then you can have the I don't care person, then you can have the it is what it is, something like that, and then you have different templates.
That's right.
So you adopt the one that works best for you.
That's right. So
as long as they're like in XML, like B2C. So people can can have fun.
So if we absolutely want people to follow the right template for loading the dishwasher, we should definitely do it in B2C in B2C's XML.
And then we need a linter to make sure that whatever they build is correct.
I think if somebody can build a B2C linter that's more, because right now the linter that we have is you upload it to the portal and it tells you it doesn't work. So
Yeah.
B2C.
Well, somebody did ask whether we can have the ability to build B2C templates in .NET or C#. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times. And one person even said, I'd love to write XML or B2C templates in YAML. And I was like, oh, you're breaking up. I can't hear you anymore. Sorry. Bad connection. I got to go.
That pushes everyone over the edge, right? I think JSON and XML are something that you can fathom, but YAML, oh man.
Hey, we ship an XSD, an XML schema file with B2C templates. So if your editor reads those templates, it tends to be not that bad. I mean, it's relatively speaking, right? Like you got to understand it and get up to speed with it and feel comfortable with it, but at least you have the advantage of a schema to know what kinds of values are correct or what should be there or what it's expecting. And but it still is, it's still pretty hard. So
it's still pretty hard.
Yeah,
I know. We're dealing with these challenges, and hopefully, as we iterate through the different designs, we can come to something that is a little bit more easy to work with.
So,
hey,
all right,
should we do the news of the day?
Yeah,
or news of the week.
Let's do some news, and then we're going to look at some. Then I think we're going to look at some code that we didn't write. So thank God.
Well, this is what we do here, right? We try to help people write better code or help them find a solution. So, let me start with an announcement that came out yesterday by Alex Simons. And it is about the fact that now Azure AD Application Proxy supports the remote desktop services web client.
Nice.
Which is great for many companies out there because it makes it a lot easier to use RDS.
Well, yeah, and Windows Virtual Desktop, it's relatively new. The sort of fully or partially managed like VDI infrastructure in Azure. In fact, one of my buddies has been working on that right now for one of his customers, and there's a whole lot of a lot of moving parts.
Did you know that we actually have a new dashboard in Azure that allows you to manage virtual desktops these days?
Nice, because why have one portal when you could have 14? That's the Microsoft way, right?
Well, it is the ability now they can manage them inside the Azure Portal, because in the past I don't think you could. So
no, that's awesome.
We're getting there. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of
small steps.
There's a lot of because we encountered this, right? A lot of customers who are like, I don't think that this person or this group should have rights in the Azure portal because they don't know what Azure is. They're a network administrator. They are managing their VDI, and so having something that's more familiar for them, I guess, is a good thing, right? Thus, we have the proliferation of portals.
Wow, and then you have another portal to manage all
the super portal and Uber portal.
I remember OMS. Did you ever do anything with OMS? That was fun times.
What, Operations Management Suite?
Yeah.
That
was like the one portal to rule them all for the IT pro people.
And it got replaced by another portal. Well, I think
in a typical Microsoft fashion, we like to iterate through designs and bring new options. So
that's like that XKCD, right? Which is there are 16 competing standards. We need one standard to do them all. Narrator. Now there are 17 competing standards. I think that must be our portal strategy. So, anyway.
Yeah.
So what else is happening?
Securing Azure environments with the Azure Active Directory. We have a white paper, a very comprehensive white paper. It's available to download today, and we'll provide you with the links later on. But this is a great resource if you want to understand how Azure AD works, how to provision and manage it, and how it works for your apps, and also how to secure Azure with Azure AD and resources. So great white paper here.
Cool.
Make sure you have read it out. Next one is by Aisha Bass. It's about handling authentication in custom team tabs using the Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
Boy, that's a mouthful. There's a lot there.
It is a mouthful. So many products and so many things happening in here, but it's one way that you can use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit to manage your resources.
Oh, it's cool though.
Great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. Great blog post by Aisha. Well done. Next one, how to determine your Azure AD tenants object limited accounts. Apparently, some people are hitting some limits, and they need to know what the limit is. So if you want to find out what the limit is, you can use the Graph Explorer or the Graph SDK and run the queries that we are seeing here by Sander Berkouwer.
Wait, scroll down a little bit. So that's
up or down?
Down.
Down.
So that's the organization endpoint. Oh, it's just organization. Oh, that's cool. And it's in the beta one. Mm-hmm. Well, now I'm kind of curious. I'm going to go try it.
Are you as curious as yesterday? Who said it was Matthias that said, I'm trying to build a solution that will try to find how big a token can be before something implodes. Which was interesting. And somebody mentioned, are you sure you want to do that? Because that's how you create black holes.
Let's see. Oh, sorry, beta organization. Oh yeah, well I tried to serialize the claims collection off of a user. That doesn't work. It's cyclical because every claims collection has a collection of claims identities, and each one of those claims identities has a collection of claims, and each one of those claims identities that has a claim on it has a claims identity on one of the claims, and it just sort of turtles all the way down. All right, so let's see. Oh my, there's a whole lot of stuff in this thing. What was the name of the thing? What was the name of the field? Ah, there it is.
Directory size quota.
Ah, so this is, I have 1,000 directory objects, which is amazing for quite literally a guy, right? 1,030 directory objects out of a quota of 300,000. So I better get to work. And clearly, I'm not.
Oh,
clearly,
these are your app registrations that you randomly created over the years and you forgot to clean up?
I'm sure it's that plus like user objects
or service principals, user objects.
There's probably. I mean, that tenant is. I wish there was like a created on date to go look at because that tenant's probably 7
or
8 years old.
Used or active or something like that. Last time used or something where you know that. Although in the portal you did get active or inactive or a date next to your
so this
application.
This one was
registrations.
This one was created in 2013, so that's what 7 years old now, and it's been connected to domains and had DirSync and Azure AD Connect and ADFS and all sorts of stuff. So I think it looks like here we go. Created date 2013, May 21st, 2013. On-premises last sync date time was 2017, November 24th of 2017. So,
Sweet.
Anyway, sorry for that distraction. Continue.
Yeah, continue, sir, with the news. Okay, next one is another blog post by a premier engineer, Marius Rosson. I mean, it's very hard to pronounce names if you haven't spoken to these people. Like everybody butchers my surname, so it's fine. I hope that they will forgive me. But this blog post actually and this source code attached to this one shows how to do on behalf of workflows with Azure AD B2C, which is a little bit unconventional considering that B2C does not support it out of the box because B2C does not support the extension grant. So Marius found a way to work around this with some custom code. So if you ever want to do that or if you have the need to do on behalf of in Azure AD B2C, you can find the sample code in GitHub.
Well, and Marius has done a ton of B2C work over the years, and he's someone I consider an authority, right? Like if I see something that Marius has put out, chances are it's good and it does the things that it needs to do. Because he's been active in that community for a long time, and he's doing a lot of work with customers who need things to work, you know. And so it's certainly I think there's a lot of weight if he's managed to make this work. It's certainly worth taking a look at if you need OBO and B2C.
I like the disclaimer. This sample code is not intended for production.
I should just put that in my signature.
What are the chances that somebody will go, you know what? We found a way, boss. We made it work.
100% of the time.
Leave out the part that it's not for production.
100% of the time.
Somebody from Microsoft wrote this one, so it must be good.
No, it'll get laundered into a Stack Overflow question where the disclaimer won't be there. And then somebody will say, I just pasted it for Stack Overflow. Everything's production ready there, right?
Well, it's funny because as premier field engineers back in the day when we were called field engineers, and I was a field engineer, we were not allowed to give production code to customers. So even though we would find a solution to their problems, we had to always put a disclaimer that, this is a sample code, and if you want to run it, it's under your, you take the risk for it. So I think this is a standard disclaimer from the services team because if you go to a customer and say, this is the code that you need to use, then you have the responsibility of giving them the code and the responsibilities at with Microsoft. So it was a way for us to create this barrier and say, you can run this code, but it will be it's your responsibility, it's your decision.
Yeah, we used to do that a lot in my old role when I was cloud solution architect. I mean, that was the same thing, right? Which was, we can show you a way to do it. We can sit shoulder to shoulder with your developers and talk them through it and walk through what we're building and why you should do it this way. But we, can't touch production. So.
Well, if you want us to write the code for you and run it in production for you, then we have MCS, where they are under contractual obligation to deliver production ready code. Yeah.
Okay.
And finally, we have a blog post by Karim following our stream on Tuesday where we talked about how to do React JS with Azure Storage, and we showed how to do it. This blog post is slightly older, so almost like a year ago to date. So Karim wrote his own implementation when the Azure SDKs were not out there. So the Azure Identity and the Azure Storage SDK was not where it is today, where our life is a lot easier. So he implemented the whole thing himself.
Ah, very cool.
Without using, yeah. So if you want to hand roll the authentication against Azure services, then this is a great blog post that shows how to do it.
No, that's super cool because, and it's using Axios. It looked like, which is like an API library for a way to connect to APIs with React. And
well, he's using Vue.js in this instance with yeah.
Or yeah, sorry, not with React specifically, but yeah, in JavaScript. And we had a customer doing something really similar a few months ago, and using something like Axios made it so much easier because it consolidates all your API calls. It's almost like anytime a request is going out, it runs through the same code, and that's where you put your your MSAL code to
custom logic,
or nice. However, if you're going to use a separate library, you'll get a token. That's where you do it, and it made it a lot easier because they had dozens and dozens of API calls, and it's a full-blown application. So, it was super cool, and this code that it uses Axios for that is super cool too.
Nice. There you go. So these are my news of the week.
All right.
If you have your own news that you'd like to share, blogs, events, other stuff, then do make sure that you share with us, and we would love to give you a shout, obviously.
All right.
There you go. Now, what else do you have for us today,
all right,
Mr. JP?
So I've got... Hey, Stuart the Coder, by the way, I just saw your message. So we had some code sent to us embarrassingly almost like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and then we went on vacation.
We had holidays in between, so it's a summer as well, so it's slow times.
So we went on vacation and things came up anyway. But I am not myself sent us some code specifically around using multiple identity providers, but having essentially being able to sort of keep them. Almost like to compose an identity or compose a principal in .NET out of all of those, right? Out of all of the different identities.
You might log in with one of them, but you might also authenticate with another one later on. And,
so I'm thinking like I sign into an app to do one thing, right? I sign into an app to do a collection of things, just so you know who I am. Yep. But then I may have a button to connect to GitHub to pull my private repos, or connect to Twitch to automatically export my videos or stream videos to YouTube or something, right? Like just an arbitrary API call on another service. And the problem that we had was in ASP.NET Core Identity, when you sign in with one, and then you sign in with another one, it seems that everything gets sort of wiped out, right?
Oh God!
So the other identities that you were using, they're not maybe they're not wiped out, but they are not accessible. So for the purposes of, or from the perspective of the developer, they might as well be wiped out, right? And so in his code that he sent us, we're doing three things. We've got OpenID Connect, which in his case is Auth0, but could be Azure AD. It could be any of the other big services out there. Identity Server. I mean, even ADFS does OpenID Connect now, but most of the newer services do OpenID Connect. But then we also have OAuth, and if you look sort of historically, OAuth was purely for authorization. There really wasn't any user data available in OAuth. There wasn't intended to be. Like, people would look at it and see, but typically it wasn't expected. It wasn't intended for that. It was purely a way for me to say, I want application A to have access to do things on my behalf in application or service B. So
right.
every time you'd open up, some sketchy Facebook app and it wanted access to your friends list and your photos and your contacts, it was using OAuth 2 to do that. And because of that, there came this sort of superset of OAuth, which was OpenID Connect. And that's where we get things like the ID tokens. We get an ID token for our application that identifies ourselves and authenticates us to the app. And then we get an access token for whatever reason, for whatever purpose we need, right? And that access token is not intended for our app. That access token is intended for a downstream service. All we're supposed to do is pick up that token and push it down the pipe.
Yes.
So this scenario where we sign in with one thing and then we access other services, I mean, we do that every day in Azure AD land, right? Like you sign in with Azure AD and then you go connect to the graph and then you go connect to Exchange, you connect to some other service, you connect to Azure, you connect to this, you connect to that.
Yeah.
But in order to do that with us, you've got to go through, you don't have to, but you go through MSAL. So there's this whole separate environment or whole separate thing for dealing with
permissions.
Yeah.
Downstream.
And dealing with these other tokens. And so I spent 2 or 3 days really kind of heads down trying to figure out how to make this work, right? So I'm going to run it. Let's just run it just so we can see what happens, right? Okay. And so when we run it, you'll see that as soon as we sign in to one service, the other services cease to have their data. Now, actually, it may not be true because I've got changes in this code, and it may actually be working as intended now, so I should probably comment some of that out. But in fact, I will. But the net of this was that I ended up finding 2 or 3 different ways to sort of achieve it, and none of them are good.
It's a workaround or a hikey way to achieve it because if I understand correctly, it's not supported by the framework right now based on a conversation. And
I don't know 100% that it's not supported. I haven't gotten full confirmation on that, but I'm expecting to get it sometime in the next few days that there really isn't a concept of having multiple. So I'm going to sign in here, right? So get signed in. I am not using the right browser window. Hang on a second.
Oh, yeah, in your browser windows and your profiles every single time.
Hey, yeah, they say, hey, come and work in identity. It'll be fun, they said. Okay. So
you'll have so many windows, they said.
So I signed in with OpenID Connect, and I've got an access token. Please don't use that for the next hour. And I've got some claims. So I'm signed in with OpenID Connect. So now I have an ID token, and the ID token has all these claims in it, things like my name, whatever. That's working as we would expect. Yep. Now, if I go back over to GitHub and sign in with GitHub, we'll notice now I have no claims. I have nothing here in Auth0, but I have an access token for GitHub, right? If I do this again for Twitch, it's pretty much the exact same thing. I have an access token. I don't have Auth0's access tokens or refresh tokens or ID tokens. I don't have my GitHub access token that I had just a minute ago, but I do have one for Twitch, which I'm not going to share because I don't know what account I'm signed into on this machine, but or in this browser profile. But the net of this is that I lose all of my other principal data. And if we go look at the principal data in these different events, because my hope was that maybe we could get both principals here, the old principal and the new principal, and then combine them together manually ourselves. Doesn't work. It's not available in the context here. Right. So there are a couple ways that I see forward. The first way is to use full-blown ASP.NET identity, meaning EF and some sort of backing store. SQL is the default, but they're providers for different things. In that case, that's very much like the code that we used when we did ADAL to MSAL a few weeks ago. And that,
yes, that was a great step.
Yep, and that there is a full-blown ASP.NET identity configuration and deployment sort of along with our app. So we had a database, we had this application user defined, and then the application user had these external identities defined. And so what that meant was that our ASP.NET identity user was a database user. It was a user in a database.
Yeah.
It was managed by identity, or by ASP.NET identity. And that was our anchor point. Like that was our anchor user. So we knew that user ID 123 was Christos at matskis.com or whatever, right?
Very close.
And
so close.
I don't want to tell everybody your email address, but I guess it's better. I guess we'd be better than your phone number. But but we had this anchor user in ASP.NET Identity, and then we would add additional external identities, so Microsoft accounts, any OAuth 2, Google, Facebook, GitHub, whatever. Those would all be added as external identities on that sort of root user object, right? And in fact, if you look at it, it's kind of like how B2C works. Is B2C has this concept of a root user object, and then there are a bunch of federated or external identities that are attached to it. And that gives us the flexibility to essentially do a transformation on all the tokens that we're getting inbound, right? So all the tokens we get from Facebook or GitHub or Google or whoever, and putting them into a standardized set. So if we know we always need the user's display name, well, we can get that from most of our providers. So we should start with that, and then give the user the option to change their display name in just our app, right? And that username or that display name would be stored in the database itself as a property of that user, rather than coming from one of the upstream services. So that's one option, and that's the most supported option. Might be the only supported option at this point, but that is the most supported option because that's sort of exactly what ASP.NET Identity is intended to do. So if you want to compose an identity of multiple external identities, the place to start is with full-blown ASP.NET Core Identity using a user store, right?
Yep.
So I kind of knew that would work, so I was like, I don't really like. I spent a little bit of time just making sure, but that's like it's kind of boring to do what works, right?
Yes.
And so I really wanted to figure out a way, if it was possible, for us to do this without having to have full-blown ASP.NET Identity, right? Because at the end of the day, I just want to set a principle and be done. I really still couldn't figure out a great way to do it. And I've got some questions out to the right folks in the hope that they can maybe help me figure it out. Or if it's even like if it's something that maybe is supported, if it's something that would work but as a side effect, or is something that's just not going to work by virtue of how it is without us writing a ton of code. And one of the keys of what I was looking at was my hope was that when we were going through each one of our providers, that we wouldn't lose the data for the other providers, right? So in ASP.NET Core, there's this concept of an authentication scheme, and the authentication scheme is sort of the bundle of configuration for different providers. And that's what we have up here, this top part of the code. We've got add OAuth with a name of GitHub. We've got add OpenID Connect with a name of Auth0. We've got add OAuth with a name of Twitch. And these names, these are sort of our named things. Now, one thing that's really neat about this in ASP.NET is if we have different parts of our application, we can use an authorization scheme, like literally the authorize tag, with what's called a policy. And the policy, the policy could be that we're going to have, you must have signed in with Auth0 and you must have signed in with GitHub or whatever, right? So your policy is what would dictate which methods or which controllers or which areas in your app that you have access to based on which ones you have.
Yep.
In fact, we've used this for like multi-tenancy in B2C. Of here's one controller action that's listed as an authentication scheme of B2C, and here's another controller action that's the authentication scheme of regular Azure AD. And by going to each one of those, the authorization framework will take over and say, oh, well, you need to sign in with B2C, you get redirected over to B2C, and stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, that's fine because we're effectively switching to say we need one of each one of these. But in our case, it's a little bit different because we don't necessarily need each individual scheme at independent times. We would kind of want all of this. We kind of want to build our own principle that's got all these schemes in there. But more practically thinking, if I'm building an API or if I'm building a web app or a service, that might be a good alternative, which is to authenticate the user how you need them to authenticate, or how you need them to authorize, and then build the claim set from what you get back, right? So in the token on ticket received, or on creating ticket on ticket received, add some claims here for a user, and create a new principal with the data that you get from just this identity provider. Excuse me. Which could involve going to a database. It could involve doing some other work to figure out what those claims should be. But that still sort of requires some sort of external database, which, I mean, practically speaking, most people are going to have an external database in their app, but they might not, because this is the age of the APIs. We have tons of apps that use lots of APIs that don't necessarily have to store any data on their own. So I absolutely understand why this would be desirable, but I just don't think that. I don't think it's quite there yet as a first-class citizen. So the alternative, from what I saw to start, is to use a claims transformer. A claims transformer does just that. It takes a principal in, it lets you do things to that principal, and then sends it back, right? So, take this out because that was my way to get rid of it. So here's a pretty basic claims transformer that takes the claim.
See, most of the code there is logging. I like it.
Well, there were some other strange things that were happening too. Like every time we accessed every time I would access one of the authentication tokens, this would run, which I thought was a little bit strange. It's almost like anytime you connect to that, you're getting something about it, right?
Right.
So this claims transformer, we have the incoming principal, and the incoming principal in this case is the principal that was authenticated.
Okay.
However, if I've already signed in with, say, OpenID Connect, and then I go sign in with GitHub or with an OAuth 2 provider, or it could be another OpenID Connect provider, doesn't really matter.
Yep.
What's happening is this is getting called twice, once before we go and once after we go. And what's great about that is that it gives us an opportunity to persist those claims, right? So this logic is not bulletproof. In fact, it's Swiss cheese. There are lots and lots of different things you would absolutely need to do here to make this something you would want to use. For example, finding a better cache key, using a better check to figure out which identity you want to be sort of your anchor identity, because by skipping the fact that we've got, because we don't have an identity database with this anchor user, right, of this original user, we're not saying which one of our identities is our sort of proper one, our anchor one, right?
Okay.
So based on my understanding of the scenario and what I thought, I said, well, let's take the Federation one, which is OpenID Connect, right? So let's take this as sort of our root one. So I want the claims off of this principal. I'm going to go stuff them in the cache. That's all this is doing.
Okay.
You can't serialize system.security.claim because there's no constructorless or no parameterless constructor. Constructorless parameters, those would be interesting. There's no parameterless constructor. So I had to create a new type called claim data, which quite literally is the exact same data types, exact same property names, whatever, just for the purposes of serializing them. So I'm serializing these and stuffing them into a cache, a distributed cache, which in this case is in memory, using iDistributed cache, which we're sending it up here, right? Now, by having a distributed cache, we essentially have a data store. So we aren't. I don't think we're actually really solving the problem here. We're just making it easier than bringing in the whole of ASP.NET identity, right? And there may be another way that you want to store the data that makes more sense. You may want to store it in Cosmos. I mean, you could store it potentially in a cookie, right? Because cookies are protected, and if they're essential and they are, if they're marked as essential and they are used for things like identity, then you don't need consent to save that cookie. So that may be another possibility would be to put it in a cookie. And it would be protected by the ASP.NET data protection stuff. So that would be one option. I didn't explore that just yet because I kind of wanted to save the server side. I was a little hesitant to send anything through like the state parameter in OAuth, which was one option I considered. Meaning I would send the claim data from provider 1 over to provider 2 when the provider 2 sign-in was going in, and that just seemed too risky and too icky. I didn't really want to do that. So instead, I'm just caching it in a distributed cache, right? Because in reality, we really only need this for this one round trip. Like, we don't need it after this, because here we're adding an identity that has all of our cached claims into it, into our transformed identity. So we create a new claims principal. We add all of the original ones to the transformed one, right? So we're just copying over the existing ones. Then we go through our cache and our caching logic, and then add a new identity to that principal that has all of our original claims that came out of the cache.
Nice.
Then we return.
So you build up iteratively as you go through, right?
Yep. So
nice.
The output here. So like, if we were to just even think about what it was doing here, like here we come back from GitHub, and we've got an access and refresh tokens for GitHub. And earlier we already went through this bit of logic, so we have our data in here. So now at this point we're going to have a principal. Oops. So we have a principal. The authentication scheme is GitHub. And then it's going to have two identities underneath it. Identity 1 is the GitHub data. Identity 2 is our new identity from cached claims. And then we get claim data back. There are probably still a couple. I think there's one extra thing we need to do here, which well, actually no, I don't know. Like, there's one last step, like what we call a sign-in async or an authenticate. That's what sort of sets the principals to the right names, right? So like when we do HTTP context user, that sort of thing. So at this point, now we are getting back both, right? So now we have one identity that has the whole thing, which also means we no longer need this data in the cache. So we could trash it here once we've gotten it here and added it to the identity. In fact, probably the next thing we need to do here would be cache data if it's null, or if it's not null. Well, if it's not null, then we would remove the with the key, because we don't need it at that point. We're done. We don't need it in the key. We don't need it there anymore. And then otherwise we would just we'll just do that instead, because we don't need it. And then we're going to return our new principal anyway. So let's run this, and you sort of see what we get. And there are a lot of things.
It's the moment of truth. It's the moment of truth. Show us, JP.
There are a lot of things about this that I'm still not entirely 100% certain on. So like, we'll share the code for sure, but I've got some questions out to people who I hope are going to be able to lend me some clarity on this. So, hopefully fairly soon we'll have some proper answers. Okay, so we're running. I've cleared all my cookies. So to the app, I am unauthenticated. So let's sign in with OpenID Connect, right? So I'm signed in. Mm-hmm. Got my claims, right? Cool. Got my claims. I don't have anything for GitHub or Twitch, so let's go authorize to GitHub. So we did that, and you'll notice I still have a claim set. So here are my claims, which we didn't have before, and I've got my GitHub data, right? Now, I've got Auth0. I don't have my Auth0 access and refresh tokens here, because those are sort of separate from the claim data, but I wanted to have, at least to start, the claim data. Now, to get the authentication tokens would be a similar mechanism, right? But all I'm doing right now is just persisting the claims, because this is really the only thing that this was what I wanted to have, right? Was I've signed into an app and I know things about the user from the ID token, and then I'm getting authorization to go and talk to other services on their behalf. So, so I think it's I don't really think this is a corner scenario. In fact, I think that as time goes on, this is only going to be a more frequent scenario where we talk to lots of disparate services from central apps. I mean, at some point, we're going to be gluing API calls together, right? And so I want I want to give more time to this and sort of think it through a little bit broader as to sort of what's the long-term view here, because, I think, I think overall, this is only going to become more popular. But I think if we look at how things are working today, like with how we do things with MSAL, for example, like we have MSAL. MSAL is handling caching those tokens separately, right? MSAL isn't using any sort of baked-in ASP.NET construct for requesting those tokens and storing them somewhere. It's storing them itself in its own cache, which of course it can use from ASP.NET if it's available, but it's storing and managing that cache independently, and it is it's not relying on, the only thing it's relying on ASP.NET for is knowing the claims in order to know who the user is for things like a cache key to go and pull specific items out of the cache. Right. So, and in some ways, I mean, it's kind of exactly the same thing, but it's certainly good feedback and a really interesting scenario. And we're going to, like we said, we're going to talk to our people on our side of is this a common scenario, and is there some sort of way we can do this in a more elegant way within the .NET Core? Because I think, in my opinion, I'd love to have an identities collection that hangs off of the principal object, right? So we've got this sort of high-level object of a principal, and then we've got a collection of identities that live underneath that principal. And those would be the ones that, or at least a way to switch, like when we're switching down here, and we're going through each one of our authentication schemes, being able to store and retrieve that data in multiple cookies or in some separate chunk of cookie data somewhere else, being able to store these and switch between them in a reliably, I think would be pretty cool too. So, yeah, lots more to come on this. I don't want to say that we're done, but I would say that if you need to do this today, use full-blown ASP.NET identity with external identities in ASP.NET.
Yeah. Yes, and it's not as high as it sounds. It's not ideal, but there's a workaround, right? So we give you an option to do it now. That there probably going to be a better way of doing it if hopefully the .NET security team comes back to us with the right answers. And you're right. I mean, it's not such an edge case that we shouldn't really be looking into that. But if I remember correctly, you did point me to a GitHub issue that was closed as by design, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there was a GitHub issue from 2017 that talked about having the relationship between the claims principal object and the identity object as sort of being one-to-one. But that's not always true either, because you can have a collection of identities that show. So, and that's what, I think that's what we're out to get clarity on, is we've got this collection of identities hanging off the principal object. Like if we look at our principal here, and we look at we have identity, and identities. Well, how does an identity end up in the single property versus one, and like which
in the collection?
Right, like which one of these is the highest level one? How do identities graduate from the collection to being the primary one? And if it's one-to-one, then, well, that's an easy answer. But even in our case here, we're adding an additional claims identity, and that claims identity is available, and it almost looks like the data sort of is inserted side to side on it. So we've got to get more answers. I don't think there's an easy answer outside of either use ASP.NET Core Identity, build some sort of caching system on your own, or some sort of persistence layer on your own. This iClaims transformation object is actually really cool, because anytime you authenticate, this runs. So this is a neat hook for modifying claims, which I don't.
I wasn't even aware that there was a transformer, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's relatively new. I don't. Maybe a 3.0 and up one, or a 3.1 and up one. But it's really. Okay. I was really pleased to use this instead of having to do it during OAuth and OpenID Connect events. And in order to use it, all you do is add, and I'm using a scoped one here. If you were managing your state better, you could potentially use a singleton and maybe take a little bit of overhead off. But I was using a scoped one because my original idea in doing this was to have it be just like a memory variable for storing it, because it just needed to persist over those 2 requests. But then you get into the trouble of, how do you make sure that you don't overwrite the wrong data?
Yes.
So, but this is all you have to do. Once you've added this to the services collection, it'll run for any of them. And of course, there are named ones with different options and that sort of thing. But yeah, check out iClaims Transformation as the interface, and I'll put it in the chat over here. And as a newer, neater way to do your transformations. So
there you go. It only took you 2 days of research and stuff to get this point, but
yeah, I had to beat my face against the wall on this one for a little while. This one was a good one. It was a good one. It's one of those ones that's deceptively simple, and
or it sounds deceptively simple, but the implementation is much more complicated.
Well, you think, oh, sure, I can have multiple identities, and then you're like, wait a minute, right? Right? Can I have multiple identities?
Well, there's an identities property over there. My assumption was you just stick them all in there, and then ASPNET resolves it magically for me. But it doesn't.
Yep, that was exactly how I felt. It was like, well, maybe. So anyway, so that's sort of our community code, because this was shared with someone who's been watching the stream and who's been talking to us on Twitter, and I know this question had been sort of sitting out there for us for a long time, so I wanted to make sure that we got it answered. And while I don't think we have a great answer, I think we have at least some guidance on what to do now, and some things for you and I to chase down.
Correct. And hopefully next week we'll have some more positive news on this, or more definitive news about the best way to do it.
Yep.
But for now, this is what it is. So if you are watching the stream out there and you're part of the community and you have questions like that, or you're struggling with something, or you get blocked by Azure AD or B2C, then feel free to reach out to us, let us know, and we will try to find an answer for you.
Yeah, and you can get to us on Twitter. You can get to us on, and we also have an email address if you're not comfortable on Twitter or not on Twitter.
We do.
And I will put that in the chat. And feel free to send us a message, sort of outlining what you're working on and how we can help. And if you're interested in being featured, we'll make sure to feature you on the show on a future Thursday.
Or even come with us on the show, and we can walk through the stuff that you build. Yeah. Doesn't have to be a problem all the time.
Yeah. That's true. If you got something really neat that worked.
Well, it doesn't have to be really neat. If you feel that you've done something great with identity, and regardless of the language or the framework, then let us know, and we'd love to have you featured on the show.
Yeah, for sure. And you're going to be doing some Java on Tuesday, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah. I wrote my first Java code yesterday ever. The last time I went near Java was at university back in 2002 when .NET was just coming out.
Yeah.
And I remember we did 2 weeks of Java, and then the lecturer came in and said, right, return all your textbooks and all your stuff. We're switching to .NET. And I was like, what is this .NET thing? Yes.
Wow.
We were the first university in Scotland to actually do, if not the UK, to do .NET. We were working very closely with Microsoft, and I remember there were a couple of Microsoft people that came to the campus to do a talk. I can't even remember the talk, but I remember the campus was packed that day. I never saw that many people on campus in one day, and I was so taken aback by the Microsoft people coming there to talk to us that I was like, I was mesmerized, and definitely I was like, man, I wish I am like that one day.
Yeah, I mean,
so anyway, we switched to .NET in year 2, and I never did Java in my life.
Wow, that's awesome.
I managed to escape it for 16 years of professional programming. I came close to it, or working with APIs that were built on top of Java, because most banks would have a mainframe, and Java seems to be the closest managed language to come near the ability to talk to mainframe. So every API that was built to interact with the mainframe was built in Java. Consumer, I would always write .NET code. So yesterday I was like, you know what? Maybe it's about time I learned some Java. So I did Java 11 with the OpenJDK. It was a learning process. I spent probably up to 7 hours, and then I wrote functions as well. So many new things to do, like Java with functions, and then understanding how the Java ecosystem works, and then sticking MSAL and doing HTTP calls on top of that, and Microsoft Graph. It's going to be an interesting stream on Tuesday for sure.
Cool.
So stick around, come and learn some Java with us. I'm definitely new in the space, but I managed to get it working, so bonus points for me.
Nice. Well, so my university,
yes.
So I went to university for music education. So they're like, why are you taking all these programming classes? But we had, all of ours were in Python. Like all of my early programming classes were in Python. And we didn't start doing Java till later. So.
Right.
Anyway, all right. Well, I guess we're going to wrap it up for today. Right on time, too.
It is right on time, but before we go, let's remind everyone that today we have the .NET Conf event on microservices. So we are going to raid the Visual Studio channel now because they're streaming the conference live. It's going to be an amazing day because they have so many interesting talks lined up and so many amazing speakers. So if you get a chance, catch it live. If not, it will always be on demand. So we're going to raid them. Add them to that stream. Stick around if you want to. And thanks everyone for joining today. It's been educational for sure.
Yeah, I think today's been a good day. We will be back Tuesday. Where it'll
4th.
Tuesday what?
It's the 4th of August, or it will be the 4th of August.
And we'll be back at 10 a.m. Eastern.
Yes. Right. Come and join us.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And yeah, we're going to go raid Visual Studio, and we'll see you all on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Don't kill the stream until you raid, man.
I won't.
Look at that.